The remainder of the photographs and videos have been taken from the top of the city tour bus, and there was quite a few rain showers.
People coming here to the north of Ireland with the promise of Pront is actually only 13 miles apart. Now when they came here, there was over 300 laws in place that not only discriminated against Catholics but also against Presbyterians and Methodists. Now back then, if you were an Anglican, you were a first-class citizen. If you were a Presbyterian or a Methodist, you were a second-class citizen. And if you were a Roman Catholic, you were a third-class citizen. Anglican, Methodist and Presbyterian, these are all denominations of the Protestant religion. Now, over time, what happened was the Presbyterians and the Methodists, they got fed up with the discriminatory laws, and a lot of them decided to emigrate. Now, the ones that were left behind, what they did was basically they banded with the Anglicans, because, as I say, they were already a denomination of the Protestant religion. Also, there were still discriminatory laws in place. There was things like one man, one vote for Protestants, one household per vote for Catholics. If you were a Protestant, you got the better jobs, they had the better homes, they basically run the place. So it was better for them to band with the Anglicans. So we end up with a large majority Protestant and a minority Catholic. Over time then, of course, the Catholics got fed up with the discriminatory laws, and in 1912 they proposed for the Home Rule Bill in Dublin. Now we had a large majority here of Protestant people, and they opposed the Home Rule Bill. We had people like Edward Carson who opposed the Home Rule Bill, and what he did was he set up his own little army, and this was called the UVF. In the south they retaliated and they set up their own little army, and that was called the IVF. We were actually on the brink of civil war here when what happened was World War I in 1916. We had the British government coming in and saying to the Irish Catholic man, if you go and fight in our war, we promise you can have your home rule. They said to the Irish Protestant man, if you go and fight in our war, we promise you there will never be home rule. Britain will govern all of Ireland. So off they all went, both Catholic and Protestant, over 70,000 of them. They fought together and they died together side by side. In actual fact, over 40,000 of them died. Now when they returned home, of course, neither got what they wanted. Politicians are a little bit like children's nappies or diapers. They're full of something and they need to be changed regular. So time went on, tensions continued, and in 1969 the Troubles as we know it broke out. We had Catholic and Protestant turning on each other, putting each other out of their areas. They built barricades in the middle of the roads with anything they could get their hands on. In the first years of the Troubles, over 2,000 Catholic and Protestant families were burnt out of their homes. 1971, the British Army came in to try to maintain peace. But what they ended up having to do was build more permanent structures. And at one stage we had over 100 peace walls here in Belfast. Now, not only did they use physical walls, they also used things like the road infrastructure. And where we are now is a perfect example of this. What they did was they built 6 lanes of fast-moving traffic between them. What better way to deter someone from throwing a brick or a petrol bomb than the thought of getting hit by a fast-moving car? And it worked. Over time, this was no longer a flashpoint area or an interface. Fast forward then to 1998, and we got the Good Friday Agreement. Now, with the Good Friday Agreement, we got our second beautiful sculpture here in the middle of the roundabout. And this is known as Rise. It's designed by a man called Wolfgang Buttress at a cost of £600,000. Basically, it's meant to represent the two communities. One community inside the other, rising up together into a better future. But folks, again, we like to give things nicknames, and we're heading towards the Falls Road in West Belfast. So this is also known as the Balls and the Falls, or the Testies and the Westies, or the Westicles, whichever you prefer. Now, as time went on then, as I say, we got the Good Friday Agreement, and this is still in place today. Thank God we have never went back to the bomb or the bullet. This road here, the 6 lanes of fast moving traffic, they were going, because it's always blocked by 5 o'clock, but for anything to move forward here through our lunatic asylum, also known as Stormont, they have to agree. Now, there's been many times over the years where they haven't agreed. They fell out, they don't even speak to each other. But they've been continuously paid for a job they aren't doing. And if you actually calculate the duration of the times that fallen out and don't do nothing but be continuously paid, it actually adds up to 11 years. It's like I say, they need changed regular. Now, with the Good Friday Agreement, there was a few stipulations put in place. One of them was they gave us back our choice of identity. So if you come from the north of Ireland and you see yourself as Irish Catholic, you can have an Irish passport. If you see yourself as British Protestant, you can have a British passport. In actual fact, if you wish, you can have both. We can have dual nationality here. And I know many in both communities who have both passports, although some may not tell their neighbour for fear of retribution. But the other one is that all paramilitary prisoners would be released early from jail under the Good Friday Agreement. So that is anyone who was affiliated with any paramilitary organisation. They were seen as political prisoners, POWs, prisoners of war. So that's people like the IRA, the INLA, the UVF, the UDA, the KFC. They were all released early from jail under the Good Friday Agreement. Now, in the Good Friday Agreement, it was sent out to every household in the whole of Ireland, both north and south. We were all asked to read it and then vote yes or no. When the vote came back from the south, it was something like 90% yes in favour of the Good Friday Agreement. When it came back from the north, it was more like 70%. Now you ask yourself why, whenever we're the ones that had to live with the Troubles. Will you think about it, folks? If you had a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, an auntie, an uncle, or a child killed here during the Troubles, you were being asked to release their murderers from jail by voting yes. And that was a very difficult decision. But thank God it did go ahead, and we've never went back to the bomb or the Buddha. And hopefully we never will. So now we're heading up onto the Falls Road. Now as we drive down the Falls Road, you'll see many murals and many flags, very different in content to the ones that you would see on the Shankill Road. These murals and flags, they depict a very tragic history of Belfast past. To look at them all objectively, you must view them as historical, because they represent the recent past of Belfast, not the present day. Nowadays, both traditions here have parity of esteem. Nowadays, if you come from Belfast, you can be either British or Irish, hence the passports. This part of the Falls Road is also known as the Gaeltacht Quarter. If you look to the street names, they're both in English Irish Gaelic. Shop fronts, English Irish Gaelic. There are 7 schools on this road that teach under the medium of English Irish Gaelic. There's buses that run up and down the road. They change from English to Irish Gaelic. As a matter of fact, the next stop coming up, stop number 12, is for Ancoterland, which is an Irish language centre. It's actually an old Presbyterian church. I will be stopping for that Irish jig. It's an old Presbyterian church. What happened during the Troubles, a lot of our churches and chapels, they just happened to be in the wrong areas as such, and they fell into disrepair and were vandalised. So after the Good Friday Agreement, it was decided they would be deconsecrated and given new purposes. This one was given the purpose of an Irish language centre. We actually had one that was given the purpose of our top comedy club. But folks, don't get me wrong, if you go over into East Belfast today, which is a predominantly Protestant area of Belfast, you'll also find a Gaeltacht Quarter. And in the Skeos Centre over there, you'll also find an Irish language centre. You see, the Irish language does not belong to one religion or the other. The Irish language belongs to anyone from the island of Ireland. It was actually the Presbyterians who saved the Irish language. When the population here dropped from just over 8.5 million to just over 4.5 million. Someone want off here? Not a problem. It was the Presbyterian who went round the island and took note of the language and saved it. Think about it, folks. 10,000 years ago, the whole of Ireland was frozen. No one could live here. There is no one that is indigenous to this land. We are a mixture of DNA. And as we drive up here and you look to your right, you'll see a blue fence. It's a reminder to us all that we are a mixture of DNA, because that's what it represents. It waves in and out. It has X and Y along the top and X and Y along the bottom. It represents DNA and chromosomes. Now behind that blue fence is the Royal Victoria Hospital, also known as the Royal. Now it's a very famous hospital in its own right, especially for its treatments of injuries from the bomb and the bullet. But it's also very famous for a man called Frank Partridge. He worked in there for over 30 years in the cardiac unit. Now, you'll not recognise his name, but you will recognise his invention. He actually invented the very first portable heart defibrillator. And he alone is responsible for saving countless lives around the world. The Royal is actually famous as well for being the very first public building in the world to have air conditioning. Whoever would have thought it? Northern Ireland, one of the coldest countries in the world, and have air conditioning. Now as we go on down the road, the next stop is stop number 13, and that's for the Bobby Sands mural. Bobby Sands was an IRA man serving time in the Maze prison in 1981. He saw himself as a prisoner of war. He saw himself as a soldier fighting in a war against the British, and he wanted political status. So he took part in a few demonstrations, his third one being his final one, the hunger strikes. Now I think he was so well known because he was the first to die. 9 others also died. But he lasted just over 2 months, 65 days.